In a pivotal moment that is reshaping Canada's federal election narrative, the exclusion of Canada from a 90-day tariff pause by the United States has triggered a wave of economic, political, and psychological reckoning. Today's focus lies on the fiery speech delivered by opposition leader Pierre Poilievre on April 11, 2025, which not only criticized Prime Minister Mark Carney's diplomatic strategy but invoked a sweeping re-evaluation of national sovereignty, economic resilience, and leadership credibility. At the core of the controversy is a decision by the U.S. administration to exempt dozens of countries from new trade tariffs for a 90-day period. Canada, long regarded as America's closest ally, was notably not among them. In response, Poilievre issued a stern rebuke during a high-profile public address, highlighting what he called a failure of leadership and negotiation on the part of the Prime Minister. Almost every country in the world got a pause on American tariffs, but not us, America's best friend, Poilievre remarked with both urgency and intensity.
Be sure and put this country first, now or than ever, my friends, before I get into the subject today, which of course is to announce the biggest crackdown on flying in Canadian history. I have to address today's latest disrespect by President Trump of our country. While President Trump announced a 90-day pause on tariffs for dozens of countries, he kept those tariffs in place on Canada. Take that in for a moment. Almost every country in the world got a pause on American tariffs, but not us, America's best friend. Our steel workers, aluminum workers, auto workers, lumber workers hit again. This after Prime Minister Carney posted that he had a, quote, productive phone call with the president. He said that he had made progress with the president. Progress. What progress do the auto workers in Brampton and Windsor and elsewhere in Canada today see? Now, to be clear, I'm not blaming Prime Minister Carney for President Trump's tariffs. These tariffs are uncalled for and unjustified, and no one can control this president. But that's precisely the point. Prime Minister Carney is running his entire campaign on a false promise that he can control the president through masterful negotiating techniques. Well, we know now that that is not true. Nobody can control this president. And while I will move quickly to negotiate and end the tariffs with protections for Canadian sovereignty as quickly as possible, we need to focus on what we can control. And this is what we can control, my friends. We need to reverse the disastrous liberal economic policies of the last 10 years that made us. So the choice in this election is not, as Mr. Carney would ask you, to overlook an entire decade of rising costs and crime and falling economy that is under the thumb of the Americans simply because he promises that somehow he's a master negotiator. No, he can't control any of that. What we're deciding at this election is, can we afford a fourth liberal term of rising and a weakened economy? Or is it time for a change with a new gesture? There are resources. I would not feel all that sprint to our country so that it is face the Americans from a position of strength. That's the choice as an answer.
He directed sharp criticism at Carney's declaration of a productive phone call with President Trump, labeling it as hollow, performative, and disconnected from results. The exclusion from the tariff pause was framed not merely as a trade issue, but as a symbolic rupture in Canada's diplomatic stature and a betrayal of its working-class citizens in vital industries, automotive, aluminum, and lumber. Yet, what made this speech more than a partisan critique was its layered appeal to values deeper than policy, truth, responsibility, and self-determination. Poilievre avoided the trap of blaming Carney for the decisions of another sovereign leader. Instead, he emphasized a broader reality: no one can predict or control the decisions of a foreign power like the U.S. under a mercurial presidency. Nobody can control this president, he said. That assertion stripped away the illusion that personal rapport or refined diplomacy could shield national interests in a volatile geopolitical environment. This brings us to the underlying message that resonated most clearly: a call to return to domestic competence and economic independence. Poilievre portrayed Canada's current economic fragility not as an inevitable result of globalization but as a consequence of a decade of liberal policies that left the nation vulnerable. His framing shifted attention from what Canada cannot control, foreign diplomacy, to what it must control, its own economic policy. The speech championed reforms rooted in economic pragmatism, tax incentives, deregulation, infrastructure investment, and a reorientation toward national productivity. For Poilievre, this isn't just about policy, it's about restoring agency to a nation perceived to be at the whim of others. We are unlawfully serving our own country, he stated, evoking both the weight of history and the urgency of the present. His tone blended emotional appeal with analytical dissection, appealing to citizens' pride, anxiety, and demand for clarity. The message appealed particularly to working-class Canadians and those in industry-centric provinces like Ontario and Quebec. The cost of being left out of tariff relief is not abstract, it touches real lives, jobs, and household economies. Brampton's auto workers, Windsor's assembly lines, Saguenay's aluminum industry, each now stands more exposed. The psychological dimension of Poilievre's rhetoric cannot be overlooked. By invoking themes of intellectual humility, clear communication, and national self-critique, he invited Canadians to question narratives of competence sold through symbolic diplomacy rather than outcomes. His speech, mirroring principles of analytical breakdown and narrative storytelling, mapped not only political failures but also a deeper identity crisis: who do we trust to lead when our supposed alliances fail us? From a historical lens, the dynamics recall previous moments when Canada's trade relations with the U.S. were marked by asymmetry and concession. The current episode adds to a legacy of perceived diplomatic shortcomings where Canadian sovereignty was negotiated under less favorable terms. Poilievre's proposal represents a deviation from the status quo, a bid to reset that pattern. Prime Minister Carney, in response, announced plans to open negotiations for a new economic and security relationship with the U.S. after the April 28 election. His strategy shifts away from retaliatory tariffs and toward structured, bilateral dialogue. Whether this proves to be a demonstration of calm statesmanship or merely a procedural deflection from political heat remains a point of contention. His optimism, though couched in technical assurance, risks appearing detached to voters who see their industries under threat. Further complicating the political spectrum, People's Party leader Maxime Bernier has taken an even more radical stance: eliminate all Canadian tariffs on U.S. goods. Arguing from a purist free market perspective, Bernier claims retaliatory measures only harm Canadian consumers. His position underscores a deeper ideological divide: whether sovereignty is best preserved through protection or liberation from trade barriers entirely. Media responses to these developments have been predictably polarized. Coverage of Poilievre's speech has leaned into its emotional and symbolic power. Articles have spotlighted his assertion that Canada is being left behind, mocked Carney's notion of negotiation progress, and praised the clarity and confrontational candor of the opposition leader's message. There is a repeated refrain that national strength begins with internal fortification, not external appeasement. In summary, Poilievre's speech marks a critical juncture in this election cycle. It blends traditional values of responsibility and national pride with strategic economic reforms and a psychologically potent message of reclaiming control. As tariffs hit home and diplomatic bets go unfulfilled, the political battlefield is no longer just about policies, it's about leadership in a world where certainty is scarce, and trust must be earned not with words, but results. As Canada moves closer to the ballot box, the question is no longer whether leadership will be tested, it already has been. The question is which vision will resonate, the assurance of dialogue, or the demand for renewal. Thank you.